Andy's father-in-law.
Well, thank you all for being here this morning. I have a lot of information that I want to share with you, and I'll just be up front and I'll be candid. I'm very excited about this work, and I could talk until midnight, but I don't want anybody to fall out a window and die. So I'm going to contain myself to an 11 o'clock stop time. But even though I'm talking a lot, if you have a question or something, please, this is an open class. I'd be happy for you to ask the question. I don't want you to go away with any unanswered questions. I cannot tell you, I tried to be respectful during the worship hour. I cannot tell you how much it means to us to be with you all this morning. The extremely generous gift that this congregation has given to disaster relief will make the difference in the lives of literally thousands of people. And the example that we gave in the worship hour about that one lady who became a Christian because she read the Bible out of the food box, I find that to be an incredible example of how what we don't recognize as being a big thing, how it's a big thing. It was a big thing for her to get a copy of God's Word, someone who'd never read it before in her life, and in 2 days knew what she needed to do. Let me tell you, when I talked about it, I was so excited when I calculated that you all had helped us place 10,000 copies of that. And it was, I say in the last 6 weeks, because that's the time period we're in now. But those trucks were delivered in 3 weeks. We delivered 34 trucks in 3 weeks, which is almost unheard of for our organization to be able to do that. And we were able to do that because of congregations like you all and the support that you've given to us. At the end of September, I find this interesting. I just have some statistics I wanted to share. At the end of September, we had distributed about $4.6 million over the course of the year. At the end of October, that number is just under $7 million. So almost $3 million worth of supplies were distributed during the month of October alone. Now, in addition to Hurricanes Helene and Milton that you heard so much about, we sent trucks to Roswell, New Mexico that had flooding during that time. We sent 2 trucks to Oklahoma City. 2 weeks ago today, eastern part of Oklahoma City got struck by some really severe tornadoes. And so 2 trucks have gone to Oklahoma City. And we've been monitoring fires in Southern California. New Jersey and New York City, of all places, have had wildfires going on. So there's no end to the work that's going on. We have distributed so far in 2024 182 shipments to 70 different cities in 19 states, and the total is just under $7 million. Over here on the front pew, yes, sir.
How do you determine where you're going to go?
Okay, great question. First and foremost, I'm a weather geek. So I'm monitoring all of the time in my area. I have the area from the Atlantic to the Mississippi River, Tennessee, and North Carolina south. My wife will tell you that from June until the end of November during the hurricane season, she said, you're crazy. Said, you're monitoring every time there's a thunderstorm off the coast of Africa, you're tracking it. I'm like, with good reason, because it's going to come here, as they did. So one of the ways is we identify, and if something happens, then I immediately try to reach out to congregations in the area and see if they'll be willing to help. The other side of it is many congregations that know about us will contact us and say, can we help? And so it's any way. Anybody lets us know. One of the little things that happened during Helene, there was a lady who's on the board of the directors of the Georgia, I believe it's the Georgia Bible Camp. It's in South Georgia. And she said, are you sending a truck to this particular little town? And I said, I haven't heard from anybody from there. And she said, my brother lives there. And she said, that congregation needs a truck. And she said, they're really small. They have about 30 members. And she said, we're having a hard time communicating with them. But they were just north of Valdosta by about 30 miles. And we sent 3 trucks to the Valdosta area. So I knew they were hard hit. Kept trying. Took us over a week and a half. Finally found there were 2 very small congregations that worked together, took a truck. We were able to get a truck to them, and they helped over 200 families. So a family member calls and says, please help this area. A congregation calls and says, we need your supplies. I did have a congregation from Tallahassee, Florida, that called in advance and said, can you send us a truck? And I said, you're already on my list to call. And he said, well, I've got the crew scheduled to come and unload on Saturday morning. And I said, well, it's still down in the Gulf, so we don't know where it's going to go just yet. But I said, you call me and we'll get you a truck ordered. And he called me on Friday and said, it went right. So we don't need the truck. And so we can't do anything much in advance because you don't know where it's going to go. Helene proved that. It went on an erratic path. It was supposed to have come straight up through metropolitan Atlanta and Chattanooga, and it would have been devastating in those cities. Instead, it veered to the right and went up and did a left hook and came through North Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee. So we have to wait until it hits to make sure everything is suitable and it's safe for us to be able to go into an area and that they have a congregation that can do it. But we do have a criteria. The criteria is that it has to be a faithful congregation of the Lord's church. And I have to be direct and talk to a congregation before we'll send supplies and make sure that they're worshiping according to the New Testament, that they're not using an instrument of music, that their worship is acceptable to God. We're looking for a mainstream congregation that's doing the Lord's work. Then I have to ask them 2 things. One is that you give this to anyone in need regardless of their faith, and that second, that it only be distributed by members of the Lord's church, not turned over to the Red Cross or any government agency. Municipalities, counties, state areas, they have a tendency to want to consolidate things and make things more efficient for the community. For example, they'll say, well, we're in this county, they might say, in Marshall County, we want everything brought to the fairgrounds and we'll distribute everything from the fairgrounds. That's not what this is. This is an effort by congregations of the church to reach out. The most frequently asked question that I get is this benevolence or is it evangelism? And I have a one-word answer. Yes. Because Jesus didn't separate the two. Why should we? If we are going out and doing something from a benevolent perspective, why are we not thinking in terms of being able to help that person spiritually and being able to do something for their spiritual life? And so that's what this work is about. And we have been, but it's a great question because I did have a congregation, they were not a congregation of the church as we know it. They were more like the Christian church, and they called and wanted to know about our supplies, and I directed them to the local congregation, told them they could go and get what they needed, individually. but that we only worked through the church. Any other questions? So we have been able to make an impact in areas where sometimes the church is not strong. Unlike Tennessee, when I moved from Henry County, where we have a population of 28,000 and 19 congregations, I moved to North Carolina, where we live in a metropolitan area of about just under 2 million, and we have 3 congregations. And so it is a mission field. I don't know what happened at the mountains, but something happened, and much of North Carolina is a mission field. So when much of western North Carolina was hit, we found 8 congregations that were willing to do the work, but some of them are small. Some of them are, less than 50 members, but they were able to reach out. Now, these were some things that I just thought I had to share with you. So with Hurricanes Hilton and Helene and Milton, in 3 weeks, we sent out 33 trucks. That was just under $3 million, 5 states, 26 congregations. Some of the amazing things, there's a congregation in Elizabethton, Tennessee. That's where the Tri-City School of Preaching is located. That congregation has taken 3 truckloads. They are amazing. They're literally helping hundreds of families. And Elizabethton, they did something in the first few days that I just thought was amazing. They took those 30 of those food boxes out to the airport. They were loaded onto Black Hawk helicopters, and they were delivered to people that were trapped on the tops of mountains that didn't have any way of getting down. I mean, that was an incredible exhibition of them trying to reach out to people. Sorrento, Florida is a little place about 30 miles north of Orlando. Sorrento has a small congregation, the Sorrento Hills congregation, that was started a few years ago with 17 members. It's up to 70 members now. And they called it was Thursday night. We were all in the Eastern time zone. So it was Thursday night, 11 p.m. And they said, we really want a truck. We were hard hit by the northern eye wall of Milton as it went across Florida. And they had devastation quite a bit in their town. And so they wanted the truck, 11 o'clock Thursday night. I said, when would you like the truck? They said, can we have it at 7 o'clock Saturday morning? Okay, we can do that. So we got the truck there to them at 7 o'clock Saturday morning. By 11 a.m., they had helped over 200 families. I mean, those are incredible things that you see happening. The 53rd Avenue congregation in Bradenton, they took 2 trucks. They got hit. They were very near where the eye wall made landfall in Sarasota County. This is in Manatee, just north of them. In one day, they helped over 1,000 individuals.
What all is on a truck?
Good question. I should have started with that. So let me ask one more question before I answer that one. By show of hands, how many of y'all have ever been to the Operations Center on Allied Drive? Just raise your hands. Wonderful. Thank you. God bless you all. So the truck is a 53-foot semi. It has 24 pallets, $75,000 to $80,000 worth of supplies. It has 300 family food boxes that we're talking about. That's a 60-pound box with enough food to feed a family of 4 for 5 days. So the last thing that goes in is the New Testament. But before that goes in, I have a great time with young people on this one. There's this little metal mechanical thing about 6 inches long that we put in the top of it. It's called a manual can opener, and it's fun because they don't know what that is or how to use it. But the manual can opener goes in there so that many of the items can be consumed without power. That's the ideal, so that we can help even before the power gets back on. Now, in addition to the family food box, we have 3 other pre-packed items. There's a personal hygiene box that has items for men and women. There's an infant care box that has everything to take care of a baby, diaper wipes, formulas. And then there's a 5-gallon cleaning bucket that has a flashlight, batteries, masks, gloves, cleaning supplies, all packed. All those things are ready to hand out. And that's the most ideal thing about the truck from disaster relief, is that congregations are not normally equipped to assemble and then distribute items. So having these items pre-packed where all you have to do is hand them out makes it very easy for the local congregation to do that work. In addition to those boxes, we send pallets of bleach, pallets of bottled water, pallets of cleanser, pallets of washing powder, new sheets, blankets, pillows, new clothing for men and women, and then we send fans, box fans, so people can dry their house out after the power's back on, tarps to go over the roofs, and then we send wheelbarrows, rakes, shovels, mops, brooms, and hose. Everything on that truck has been designed to help in almost any type of disaster. And that has basically gone untouched for over 30 years. And over 30 years started really after Hurricane Andrew in '92 down in South Florida. The truck has had one major change in the food boxes. If you've been there and packed it, you know what I'm going to say. But in the old original days, if the truck was going up north, it had oats. If it was going down south, it had grits. That's the only real change we've made to the food box. But it has been shown to be a very efficient load. In fact, after Hurricane Katrina on the Gulf Coast back in 2005, the person who oversaw all of the relief efforts for the U.S. government, a military man, was out of San Antonio, Texas. He wrote a letter. He was not a member of the church. He wrote a letter. We have it at Disaster Relief. He said of all the things that they saw sent in Hurricane Katrina, nothing compared to what we sent from Disaster Relief, because it was prepared, it was ready to go, and it was exactly what was needed. So, by the way, we don't keep track of those things, but there were over 300 baptisms and 1,700 restorations reported by congregations in that area directly as a result of their relief effort. So, the truck is driven by a volunteer driver. If anybody has a CDL, I'm not asking you, I'm begging you, please come and drive for us, because we desperately need drivers. But the truck, it's so simple. I want to share with you, this happened last year in Union City. And you know where Union City is? Up in the northwest corner of the state by Reelfoot Lake. They had one day, they had 12 inches of rain. Very severe flooding in Union City. The congregation there, Bishop Street in Union City, I called and left a message on Monday after I heard about the flooding. An example of, how do we get in contact. I left a message on the answering machine. I didn't hear back. It was Thursday night before I got a call back. It was one of the deacons. He said, I just got your message. He was beside himself. 100 and something homes destroyed. People hurting. They'd just gotten a note that FEMA was not going to do anything because it didn't reach the threshold. Apparently there's a financial level that the damage has to be before FEMA comes in. And he said, we have all these people, we want to help them, we don't. He went on and on for a couple minutes, and I said, we can get you a truck. Again, it was Thursday night, it was about 10 o'clock. And he said, I asked, when would you like the truck? And he said, Saturday at 8 a.m. I said, okay, and where would you like it delivered? He gave me the address. I said, okay. And he said, so what do we need to do to get the truck? And I said, that's it. He said, what do you mean that's it? I said, you gave me the time and the address, that's it. And he said, there's no paperwork? And I said, nope. He said, there's no bureaucracy? I said, nope. His answer, you're going to love his answer. He said, I work for TBI. He said, we have a stack of paperwork that we'd have to fill out. And I said, no, there's no paperwork. I said, that's it. They delivered the truck at 8 o'clock Saturday morning. Here's an interesting twist on that. While they were unloading the truck, a tornado hit about 4 miles north of town. They immediately took a truck, put some of the supplies in it. They went up and were helping the people that got hit by the tornado before anybody even knew a tornado had occurred. And then that afternoon, we got a call from the manager of the trailer park that was flooded that had 70 homes that were completely destroyed. People had been living for a week with nothing. And she was in tears because she wanted to thank us for what that congregation had done. Now, we make an effort always to have the local congregation put their information in the boxes. The only thing we put in the box is that New Testament that I showed you. But we want the local congregation to put their information, to put tracts, to put information about their services, about their congregation. We want the connection to be with that local congregation, because that's where the good work comes from. That's what happens when I say the truck gets unloaded, is that they reach out. There was a congregation in Century, Florida. This was in February of 2015. If you've been through Century, you might have been there and never even knew it. If you were on your way down to Pensacola, you might have gone through Century. It's right on the Alabama-Florida line. Century is in Escambia County. They say it's the poorest community in that county, and that Escambia County is the poorest community in the state of Florida. Well, they had a devastating tornado. The congregation there was about 100 members. I talked to the elder, and he said, yeah, we want to help our neighbors. He said, the area around us is completely demolished. And so we went over there, and their sign to their building was bent at a 45-degree angle. That was the only damage they had. But then for 300 yards all around them was total destruction. And he said, we want a truck. He said, the problem is our building is small. We don't have any place to put the truck. He says, but we want the supplies. He says, we'll have it figured out. Send the truck. From the time they ordered it until the time it was delivered, they had a little drive-through out for the building to be able to get in and out of the weather. They built a room in 24 hours. Sheetrock, electric, everything, just to distribute the truck from. And so when the truck got there and unloaded, they started helping. 3 weeks later on a Wednesday night, the elder called me and he said, I had to call you, Ken. He said, there's a family. He said, you know, like most congregations that we've been a part of, they've invited the neighbors to Vacation Bible School, to a gospel meeting, did different functions, you know, things, tried to get people to come. And they've had, you know, modest success, I think we can say. So this couple they'd been trying to study with for years never could make any headway. Their home was completely destroyed by the tornado. They helped them with food boxes. They helped them in many different ways. He called me 3 weeks later and said, tonight both the man and the woman were baptized. And that's all I can say is, you know, praise the Lord and the glory to God, because we don't know what the impact's going to be. Jennifer and I have just returned from a lectureship down in South Florida that's held every year down in Palm Beach Lakes, the South Florida lectureship. We were there a few years ago, and we had an example of the food box. It was sitting out. A young woman came up in her late 20s. She saw the box, and she burst into tears. And Jennifer said, are you okay? You know, everything okay? And she said, no, I just need a moment. She said, I was 9 years old when Hurricane Andrew destroyed our home in Homestead. We lost everything. And she said, my family is alive today because of those food boxes. And this is the first time I've seen one since. Now, I want to ask one question. She was 9 years old, and she remembers those food boxes. I want you to think about all the things that you have done in the name of the Lord for people, the good deeds and things that you've done. Do you even realize, do we even think about the 9-year-old that might have seen you doing that and the impact that you're going to have on their life? God will give the increase. Yes. Well, that's a great question. Back in 1989, there was a hurricane named Hugo. Hugo hit Charleston and then did not follow its directions. It went all the way inland to Charlotte and then all the way up through western North Carolina, all the way up to the Canadian border. Hugo was devastating. Well, at that time, Davidson County, there's this thing that's not out there anymore, but there was this thing called the Yellow Pages. There were 129 congregations in Davidson County in the Yellow Pages. And several of the congregations said, we need to do something to help. Now, I'm going to give them an A+ for their heart. I'm not going to give them as high a grade for execution, because they said, we're going to rent a truck. And then they had announcements made at 129 congregations for everyone to go to the store and get a bag and bring what they thought they needed and they were going to send this truck. So A+ for their hearts. But can you imagine what was on that truck? If all of us, even if half of us went to the store and got what we thought was important, it'd be a kind of a jumbled, So that's how it started. And then in late 1991, it got organized the way it did. And since Andrew in 92, we've operated pretty much the same way. But it was a group of congregations in the Nashville area that started to do that. The first executive director was the late Joe Dudney. If any of you have met Brother Dudney, he was from Gainsboro. And I'm not sure, I'm trying to remember what county Gainsboro is in, but he always told me with great pride that Gainsboro had the highest percentage of its county residents were members of the church. Jackson County, thank you. They worked tirelessly. I remember them talking about worrying about whether or not they would have enough to pay the initial bills. And then they were blessed with being able to buy the old Lowe's Home Improvement Warehouse on Allied Drive. And then they've built onto that. So we have 90,000 square feet. If you have not been up there, I strongly encourage you any day of the week, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. Don't have to have an appointment. If you're in Nashville and can go by and take a quick tour, 30 minutes, I think you'd be amazed to see what it is. We have, to your point, we have 6 truckloads, 6 to 10 truckloads ready to go, so that one man with a forklift can load a truck in 45 minutes and we can get a volunteer driver and be on the way. I want to share an account with you to that point. It was, I believe, December of 2016. There was a tornado on the ground for 105 miles. It started over near the Mississippi River, near the Delta, up through Mississippi, and it hit Holly Springs, Mississippi. Holly Springs is about 40 miles southeast of Memphis. Holly Springs was devastated by this. I think it was an F4 tornado. And so, follow my timeline on this. So it was late on the night of the 23rd of December. So at noon on the 24th of December, I started trying to contact a congregation. Now, if a congregation does not have full-time administrative support, it's very hard to get a hold of somebody at the congregation to start with. Usually leave a message and then somebody will get back in touch with you. It's the 24th of December. And so I start looking, and I find online an old directory of congregations in Mississippi. The first 2 numbers I called were out of service. The third number I called was an older gentleman. He said, I don't serve anymore, but I'll give your name and number to somebody and have them call you. Now, I'm in the Eastern time zone, so it's going on 1 o'clock, December the 24th. He calls, and I explained to him, I said, we'd like to send you a truck full of supplies, $75,000 to $80,000, 53-foot semi, unload it, give it to you, ask you to give it out in the name of the Lord, and only distribute it by members of the church. And he said, I never heard of you. I said, I understand. And I gave him a website, and I said, this is what we'd like to do. And he said, okay. He said, yeah, we'd like to have it. When will you have the truck here? I said, we can have the truck there tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Is that anything going through anybody's mind? 8 a.m. on December the 25th, we'll have a 53-foot semi that needs to be unloaded. He said, how many people need to be there? And I said, well, if you're doing it manually, if you don't have a forklift, maybe 25. There's a long pause. He said, all right, we'll see what we can do. So I called, and we had a truck driver who said, our family is having their holiday celebration at 7:30 on that night. He said, I'll be through with that. I can be there by 11 p.m. I can be in Nashville at 11 o'clock, and we'll have the truck to Holly Springs. And that's what he did. And so the truck was at Holly Springs at 8 a.m. on December the 25th. Guess how many people were there to unload the truck? 75. Now, what he didn't tell me, rascal that he is, he was an elder, but he was also the county superintendent of schools. And so what he did was he contacted the principal of every school in that county and got a list of every single family that had been impacted by that tornado. And when that truck unloaded at 8 o'clock, they had a fleet of trailers, pickups, and cars out there. They immediately put the supplies into those trucks and trailers. By noon on the 25th, every single family that had been impacted by that tornado had been helped by the Holly Springs Church of Christ. I just thought that was marvelous. What amazing things. And we see that replicated time after time after time. Hurricane Helene, a month ago, Central Church of Christ, Augusta, Georgia. They got slammed by by Hurricane Helene. When it veered off to the right and went east, it devastated Augusta. Central Congregation, they took 3 trucks. They also, every single box that they handed out, they asked the family, would you be willing to study the Bible? They have over 200 Bible studies set up directly as a result of asking and helping. See, that's where we as the Lord's church have opportunity. That verse just keeps ringing in my mind. Therefore, we've got to look for the opportunity. We've got to be awake for the opportunity. But they've set up 200 Bible studies. I think that's just a terrific testimony to their love for Jesus. Now, there's a second phase, and I want to mention it because this clock is either running really fast or something, but we're running out of time. But there's a phase 2. How many of you know about phase 2 or ever heard about phase 2 from disaster relief? Aha. And a bunch of you have been to Nashville. Phase 2 doesn't happen in Nashville. Phase 2 happens in the field. So imagine you're in a storm, you're in an area hit by a disaster, and you've lost everything. We're thankful that a congregation is there to give you food and cleaning supplies and things that you need immediately. But what happens 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months down the road? When you get back into a place to live, but you've lost everything. Sadly, Hurricane Helene, again, heard this firsthand. A poor woman had 6 feet of water in her house. She got a $750 check from FEMA, and they told her that it was a loan, that she'd have to pay it back if they couldn't verify that she was entitled to that. Another family, $1,974 is what they were paid. They were told that they wouldn't get any more because they had failed to document that they had maintained the foundation on their home. I don't even know what that means, but the truth of the matter is there are people that will be hurting for a long time and will never recover. 2 weeks ago, Jennifer and I worshiped in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I spoke, and a woman came up in tears, and she had lost her entire home just east of Asheville due to the flooding. It was completely gone. They couldn't even find remnants of it. And she said she'd gotten her letter the day before that her claim had been denied because she couldn't prove that it was her primary residence. And so the fact of the matter is there are needs. Well, one way we can help with these needs is in phase 2. If a family has a family income of less than $40,000 a year, if they did not have insurance or did not have adequate insurance, and in the most recent storm, more than 90% of the people did not have flood insurance, and the flood insurance that they had may not have been adequate, because if you understand the insurance business, It matters whether the water was rising water, blowing water, or falling water. And so they didn't have coverage. Or if they're seniors, they have no way of replacing it. Then disaster relief will, through a local congregation, provide those families a brand new appliance, a brand new room of furniture, and clean beds. And we have already started doing that. In West Jefferson, North Carolina, a woman, an older woman who had a paraplegic son, adult son, lost her washer and dryer. We were able to go and get them a washer and dryer almost immediately to get that replaced for her. Elizabethton has placed a large order. Down in Cedar Key, Florida, which has been hit for the 4th time in 13 months. They got hit by Hurricane Idalia, Hurricane Debbie, Hurricane Helene, and Hurricane Milton. They had a 9-foot storm surge go over the island twice. And they have placed a large order for appliances, furniture, and beds for those individuals. So phase 2 is a very important recovery point when people have been able to get back into their homes. I'm going along pretty fast. Any questions before I? Yes.
In the Testament, you said there are handwritten notes. Who writes those notes?
We have volunteers that come in and do it. We have a couple of congregations where people that aren't physically able to come and do the boxes, that they will write out notes. We'll send out blanks to them, and they'll write them and bring them in. We have we don't advocate for this, but we have a number of ladies groups. I say ladies; it's predominantly ladies that make quilts, and they bring in baby quilts, and we put those in the baby boxes so that they have something as well. But it's usually congregations will take and write the notes. And then we've got a group of ladies that comes in 2 or 3 times a week and pack those smaller infant care boxes and the hygiene boxes. Yes?
Do y'all have to pay for your advertisement on TV and radio, or do you get it free?
We do not pay for any advertisement. So if you see the media out there, that is at their discretion. We do not pay for any of that. And I know occasionally that the TV stations out of Nashville will come and interview Mike Lewis, our executive director, and they'll do a piece on it. I think channel 17, 4, and 5 all did that over the past with Hurricane Helene.
Do you have pre-produced radio ads?
No, we do not. We don't do any advertising. That's an interesting question. We've had opportunities to set up an exhibit at something in Nashville. We have chosen not to do that because we are supported primarily through members and congregations of the Lord's church. And so we don't really reach out to outside organizations for assistance. Now, we do have a number of members of the church that their companies will either match the federal campaign. If they're federal employees, they can match through that. So we get some support through federal matching, or like if somebody's employer does United Way, they can designate Churches of Christ Disaster Relief to get the support. But the vast majority, 99% of what we receive, is from individuals and congregations.
If you had a radio station that would be willing to do it for free, would you send it? Could you make that happen?
I would have to say we could. Our executive director would be happy to talk to somebody about that. Yeah. Do I?
She's the person to talk to.
Ah, very good. Well, let me give you my card. We have, one of the things that I don't know the right word to use. It's not pride, because I'm not prideful about it. I am thankful that in the 15 years that Jennifer and I have been working, I've never requested financial support. And we've never had to reach out and say, we want a contribution, or please give us a contribution. My personal belief has been, and I spent 30 years in sales and marketing, is that the best thing that I can do for disaster relief is to share and tell you what we do. If you're inclined to want to support that, then you will. But we've never had to tell anyone no. We've never had to say to a congregation no. We came close during the pandemic. I'll tell you, that was a challenging time. There were 2 times that I can think of where disaster relief was really pushed to the limit. One was in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, and then 10 days later, Hurricane Irma hit Florida. And we had 2 areas that were hard hit by major hurricanes. The problem with Houston, it's our biggest nightmare, if you will, because 4th largest city in the country, on the coast, subject to a tropical system, and if there's a place that has as many, if not more, congregations of the Church of Christ than Tennessee, it's Texas. And so you've got all of that. It's the perfect storm, if you will. And when Harvey hit Houston, you suddenly had 35 congregations of the Church of Christ all requesting a truck at the same time. Do you remember how many people I said we have working? 13? And that includes everybody. So that was a challenge. And then Irma on top of that. In 1 month, we sent out 53 trucks. That's just almost unheard of. But we did it. God took care of us, and we never had to say no to anybody. Now, during the pandemic, this is an incredible timing as well. Davidson County put a strict limit. We put out the call for packing our food boxes. You know how many people are there? It's 250 to 400 people that are packing those boxes. They pack 1,500 of those boxes in 3 hours. That's enough for 5 trucks. At the same time, that very week is when those tornadoes went all across Tennessee. Started in Benton County. It hit Davidson County, Wilson County, Cookeville. It killed 16 people in Cookeville, including members of the church. All that happened right at the time of the pandemic. So how are we going to pack boxes? Jennifer and I were up there. She got on one side of the line. I got on the other side. She was smarter. She got on the side with the big items. I got on the side with the Vienna sausage and all the little stuff. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. And the 2 of us packed boxes. Well, we worked all day. We did the best we could. And we packed 1 pallet, 25 boxes. We normally run the line and in 3 hours pack 1,500 boxes. And all these tornadoes had occurred, and we're sending trucks out. We know we're getting requests. Jefferson Avenue congregation in Cookeville had gotten hit by that tornado, and they are a wonderful congregation to respond. In fact, President Trump had gone to their building, and there's video of President Trump in front of our food boxes at Jefferson Avenue Church of Christ saying this is the way it should be done. All right. So the very next day, we loaded this pallet, and that was enough. It was our last truck. They were literally loading the last truck to go out. If we get another call, we don't have anything to send. Jefferson Avenue showed up the next day, and they were told, well, we can't have large groups packing. We can't have more than a group of 6. And their response was, we brought 3 groups of 6. And so they packed enough for a truck. We never had to say to anybody, we don't have supplies to send to you. And I just thank God that He has watched over our work and been able to do that. That clock says 11 o'clock. That cannot possibly be right. I've got so much more to talk about, but I also have to respect the time, that the time is up. I have to leave you with one quick account that I think is just marvelous. There was a tornado down in North Alabama, Fairfield, where it was just north of Birmingham. Center Point was the area, and Gardendale. The Gardendale congregation took a truck. There were over 400 homes destroyed. But Gardendale was 10 miles away from Fultondale. Fultondale, and Centerpoint. And the Centerpoint congregation wanted to help, but they were not able to. They didn't have a building. They'd lost their building during the pandemic, and they were doing virtual broadcasts from the basement of a house. And so they talked to the community. The town of Centerpoint gave them the community center and said, you can operate out of the community center and distribute supplies. So they did. The first conversion was on day 3. It was the manager of the community center. It wasn't even one of the people that they'd helped. And she was baptized. And I talked to the preacher the next week, and he said, we've had 9 baptisms. I said, you've had 9 baptisms already? He said, yes. And so I was telling people that, and I called him the next week, and I said, I've been telling everybody about your 9 baptisms. He said, well, that's not right. He said, it's 18. And then I talked to him the next week, and it was 24. Ultimately, they had 29 baptisms. And I said, wait a minute. You don't have a building. You don't have a baptistry. It's January, and it's in the middle of the pandemic. You can't be doing this. He said, we are. I said, how are you doing that? He said, we got a portable baptistry and set it up outside. I said, you set up a baptistry outside in January? He said, yeah, we couldn't be inside because of the pandemic. And so they're baptizing people outside in January. And he said, this has just been an amazing opportunity for us to do the work of the Lord. And he said, the people's hearts are open. And he said, we're able to do this. And so he had told me that the community center said, you can keep worshiping here until you can find a building. Well, there was a congregation outside Nashville that was looking for a mission spot. I told him about this congregation. He called me this past summer and said, you got to come and see us. I said, well, I'd love to do that. He said, you got to come and see our new building. He said, we've got a building. And all because in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of winter, with no baptistry, they said, God has given us this opportunity. How can we make it? And they did it. Thank you all so much. Is there, what? Oh, yes. Reminder, there's calendars, 25 calendars, pins, information, and a sheet of through October of the places that we've assisted up here. Help yourselves to it. God bless you all again. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Any final questions before? Jennifer and I will be around if you have a question. Thank you again, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.